Good morning, friends, and happy Monday. I'm here to read the rest of chapter 36 and chapter 37 to you today. So if you were watching last week, you remember that Malevolent turned into her dragon form, and Jack was in the middle of fighting her. So let's see what happened. Jack had crawled to her head, and Malevolent was doing everything she can to knock him off. And just like that, the dragon's entire body shuddered to a stop. Completely shocked, the dragon teased, trying to move. Failing that, she attempted to spit out the reins. When the magic of the reins kept her from doing even that, she began shrieking louder and louder as her entire body shook and shuddered below Jack. Each time he felt the dragon's body quake, Jack was sure that the reins' magic would give out against Malevolent's monstrous strength and rage. Goodness gracious. Yet each time, the magic miraculously held the great beast in check. As Malevolent gradually gave up and settled down, Jack sighed deeply in relief. Sometimes the simplest magic charms really did work the best. "I think I got her," Jack told May, trying to hide the surprise in his voice. "Good job," she yelled. "Now what?" "I'm open to suggestions," he admitted. From the floor, May growled in frustration. "I really miss my sarcasm right now," she said. "So what do the reins do exactly? I mean, Samson did whatever we told him. Maybe she will?" "Maybe," Jack said. "Worth a try at least." While May grabbed the mirror and his grandfather's bag to get them out of the way, Jack tightened his grip on the reins. "What should I tell her to do?" "Try something simple," May suggested. "Right," he said. "Malevolent, sit." Immediately, the dragon dropped her haunches to the floor, sending Malevolent into a torrent of profanity Jack wasn't familiar with, many of the words and languages he wasn't sure existed anymore. "That is not my name," the dragon growled. "My name is Mellifluent. My sisters gave me the name Malevolent to make your kind fear me." "I don't care what you're called," Jack said. "Let's try something a little more complex. Mellifluent, free Merryweather from the mirror." This set off the loudest bout of wailing yet, but the dragon obediently began to mumble words that Jack couldn't understand. He suspected that even if he could make out what Malevolent was saying, he wouldn't have been able to remember it to save his life. Of course, it wasn't his life that was being saved right now. As Malevolent chanted, Jack began to hear tones, melodies that played off one another in harsh, unpleasant ways. It reminded him of Merryweather's magic during her fight with the genie. Yet where Merryweather's magic had struck him as beautiful, Malevolent's harmony sent a chill running through his body. Despite that, the spell seemed to be working. As they all watched, a cloud of blue mist slowly leaked out of the spot where the mirror had previously been cracked. As the blue gradually left, the greenish-yellow mist of the genie, still trapped within the mirror, began to swirl uncontrollably. The genie grew more and more wild until the last of the blue was sucked out of the glass and into the air around them. The blue mist started to come together, looking as if it was going to form Merryweather's shape. Jack almost thought he could see a smile where the Fairy Queen's head would be. The fairy in May's hair even began jumping up and down excitedly. Then abruptly, the mist began to drift apart, dissipating into nothingness. "Wait!" Jack yelled to her. Where are you going? You're safe. You're all right now." "She's hardly that," the dragon beneath him growled furiously. Merryweather was barely alive. She most likely fled back to her homeland to heal herself. At this, the dragon snaked her neck around until she was face to face with Jack, her green eyes burning into him. "Now I did as you command. She is free. Release me." Jack started to respond, then noticed the green mist was trickling out the same crack that Merryweather had just escaped from. "Fix the crack in the mirror," he shouted, tugging backward on the reins. The dragon renewed her struggle, shaking her body so hard that Jack had to grit his teeth to keep from biting his tongue. Just as he thought her head was going to whip around and bite him in half, Malevolent tucked her head down and began to chant again. This time, the hole in the glass began to slowly knit itself together as if it were ripped clothing being sewn, cutting off the stream of green mist as it closed. Finally, it shut completely, leaving the mirror's glass as seamless as they'd first seen it. What little green mist that had managed to make it through the hole quickly rose toward the ceiling, then up and out the same grate Jack and May had come in through. "Is it?" May asked, reaching out for the mirror with a shaking hand. "Give it a try," Jack said, his whole body shaking, both from nervousness and from the dragon's continued struggle. "You," he said to the dragon, "don't move unless I say so." This cut out the shaking altogether. The Malevolent continued to shriek furiously, every now and then. A few feet away, the princess propped the mirror up against a charred portion of the wall, removed her crown necklace, then pushed it into the mirror's frame, both hands shaking as she did so. Immediately, the flat face of the genie surfaced on the mirror's glass as if it were emerging from underwater. The fire in its eyes glowed with a white-hot intensity, and the look it shot May could have burned what was left of the room. But then the genie turned its eyes downward with an almost respectful look. "How may I serve you?" it asked the princess. Chapter 37. "Stay," Jack ordered the dragon. The dragon let out another howl. "And stop the screaming," Jack added absently, and the howling stopped immediately. He tossed a leg over the dragon's neck, then slid down her body to the floor. He could feel Malevolent's green eyes boring into the back of his head, but he ignored her. Jack," Philip said, still chained to the wall. "Might you have a moment to release me?" "Philip," May said, turning away from the mirror for the first time since the genie spoke to her. "Oh my God, I can't believe we didn't—" "I've got him," Jack said to her. "Just ask the mirror your question before anything else comes up." He hurled the charred remains of a chair, then pushed half a table out of his way to reach the prince. Sadly, Philip didn't look too good. Between the torture and the dragon's fire, Jack was actually surprised the prince was still conscious. As it was, one of his eyes was swollen shut, and the rest of his face was a mess of purple and red. His expensive royal clothes hadn't survived any better. There were more tears and rips in his tunic than there were clean spots. And beneath those rips and tears were more bruises and cuts. "We'll get you fixed up, Philip," Jack said softly as he carefully sliced through the prince's manacles with the witch's knife. The prince smiled, then winced at the pain. "I would like to say I have been through worse, but it hardly seems the most appropriate moment to begin telling lies." "Nice," Jack said, then gently helped Philip to his feet. On the other side of the room, May took a deep breath, closed her eyes, and asked her question. "Mirror," she said slowly, "please tell me where my grandmother is." "Your grandmother is imprisoned within the palace of the Snow Queen," the mirror replied in its monotone voice. "That must be one of Snow White's strongholds," Philip said as Jack set him down next to May. Jack then moved back to Malevolent, whose eyes hadn't left him this entire time. Despite the success of the range, Jack didn't like the situation at all. Magic had a tendency to fail, and usually at the worst possible time. "Unfortunately, no one knows where those fortresses might be," Philip continued. "The locations were kept secret to keep the Wicked Queen from finding them." He shook his head. "Apparently that was in vain if the Wicked Queen now holds your grandmother in one of her own castles." "Where is the palace of the Snow Queen located?" May asked the mirror, carefully wording her question. Jack nodded in approval. The princess was learning. It was never good to be ambiguous with bitter magical creatures. "The palace of the Snow Queen," the mirror said, "is located in the snowbound lands at the very top of the world, surrounded by mountains higher than the clouds." "Uh-oh," Jack said. "So how do we get there?" May asked, panic edging into her voice. "The palace is unreachable under your power," the mirror responded. "What?" May shouted. The mirror repeated itself, and this time Jack could have sworn the genie smiled. "Wait, May," Jack said. "That doesn't mean we can't get to it. It's just saying we can't walk there. There's obviously another way to get there without physically traveling that distance. After all, the huntsman's been there and back again, right?" "Mirror," May said, no messing around. "Is that right?" "Has the huntsman been to the palace and back? And if so, how did he do it?" "The huntsman has indeed traveled to and from the palace," the mirror stated. "He does so through the use of magical abilities that lie beyond your power." May growled in frustration. "I'm going to break this thing again in about 2 seconds, she yelled. "That can't be the only way," Jack said to Philip, since May seemed to be off on her own tangent. "Perhaps we could find Merryweather," Philip said. "Once she has healed herself, she might transport us to the palace." "And how long will that take?" May said, whirling around on Philip. "My grandmother doesn't have that kind of time." From behind, a deep rumbling startled all three of them. Jack whirled to find Malevolent laughing softly to herself. "I thought I told you to be quiet," he said, narrowing his eyes. "You said to stop screaming, young lord," the dragon said, and laughed harder. "Poor little humans can't find their way to one of their own castles." "Jack, if you don't shut her up," May warned. "You will what?" Malevolent said, her mouth pulling back into a smile, revealing her disgustingly sharp teeth. "Poor little princess. If only you had a way to the palace of the Snow Queen, your grandmother might yet have lived. But now—" "What do you know about it?" Jack said. "Why, nothing, of course," the dragon said with an indignant hiss. "She knows something," Philip said, and Jack nodded. Jack climbed onto the dragon's back and took the magic reins in his hands. "Answer me truthfully," Jack ordered her. "Can you take us to the palace of the Snow Queen?" Without struggling in the least, the dragon responded. "Of course," she said, "though I will not." "Yes, you will," May said, grabbing the mirror and shoving it into Jack's grandfather's bag. "Wolf, help me get Philip onto her back." And we'll have to stop there, and we'll read the rest tomorrow. Bye, guys.